and joining us here for this morning's presentation. Hopefully you guys all got here a little bit early enough to find parking and whatnot. I know it can be a little crazy around here. It's not as windy right now, so that's kind of nice. Before we talk about what we're going to be doing today, I just wanted to throw out some good information for you guys. We've been approved to do our college tour to the Northwest in the spring for the first time, since COVID. So we will be doing that. There's going to be a lot more information coming out in the CTW this week. We'll have pricing and everything hopefully going out next week. But we will be going to the Northwest, so Oregon, Washington, and that will be from April 2nd through April 5th, 6th. So it's 5 days, 4 nights. They're going to see, I think, anywhere from, 7 to 9 schools in that short amount of time. So it's a great opportunity for students to kind of come and join us on a college tour. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There will be more information coming out in that CTW and then following next week as well. Today what we're going to be doing is talking about some financial aid information. We have one of our good friends, Corinne Schell from Marist College, coming out to help us out with that. She's been helping us out for a couple of years now to kind of just help educate you guys on this process. We know that we get a lot of questions about this. Sometimes it's nice to hear it from a college rep, versus just your high school counselors. So this way you guys know where we're getting our information from. But she's a wealth of knowledge, and we're so grateful to have her here today. So
great, thank you.
Further ado,
Appreciate it. Again, my name is Corinne Schell. I'm Director of West Coast Admission at Marist College. Anybody here at Marist? Yeah, a couple of people. We are located in the Northeast, so I thought when he was mentioning north for the tour, he was going to say east, but it's west. But we're located about an hour and a half north of New York City, private four-year liberal arts, Division I. We also have a campus in Florence, Italy. I'm a little passionate about Marist. I'm a Marist grad. My husband's son, daughter, sister, niece, nephew, twin nieces. So kind of partial family connections there. But my goal today is to kind of help you understand the process of financial aid. And one of the things that I really want to do is to help you create a list of questions that you can ask the representatives from the financial aid office at the schools that your students are looking at. So how many freshman parents? Excellent. Sophomore? Juniors? And seniors? Great. How many here have started the process, which I hope you have by now, for seniors? Okay. How many have had the chance to visit a college campus? The ones who just raised their hand, how many of you made an appointment to sit with somebody in the financial aid office at the schools you toured? Yeah, nobody usually tends to do that. They're so focused on the admission aspect. But in reality, if you're looking for financial assistance, then it should become part of your process in selecting a school. So there's a couple of reasons why I think it's important to do that, because the first thing you're going to do, make an appointment with someone in financial aid. It only has to be 10 minutes, but the goal is to get a contact from that particular school. So what you do is when you sit down, you grab their business card, because now then you have a person that you can deal with at that school. And you're going to have your student, not you, have a list of questions that they can ask that financial aid person. And the most important question will be, does your school meet a student's financial need 100%? And you're like, what is she talking about? But as I progress through my presentation, you'll understand why that's such an important question. The second question should be about academic scholarship. I mean, it is free money. And you want to know, does the school require a student to complete a separate application for an academic-based scholarship? Some schools do, and some do not. At Marist, we do not. All students accepted are considered for an academic scholarship. If they are eligible, it's part of their acceptance letter. There are deadlines at some schools for a student to apply for a scholarship, and you don't want to miss the deadlines. I was at a college fair, and there was a college next to me, and a senior, it was in the spring, a senior comes running up to the table. He's so excited. He's been accepted to the school. He wants to go there. And then he asked the question about scholarship. And the counselor looked at him, and she's like, did you apply? And he's like, what are you talking about? So, I mean, in reality, you don't know what the amount of a scholarship would be, and that student obviously has lost out on scholarship because he did not know that there was a deadline for that school. In regards to scholarship, also find out how many quarters, semesters, trimesters, years is a student eligible for that. Are there requirements to renew the scholarship, such as GPA and full-time, part-time? At Marist there is. Our students have to maintain a cumulative grade point average of a 2.85, not each semester, cumulative. And they do have to be full-time. There is a cutoff of 4 years, that's 8 semesters. So what if your student is going to be going to that school for 5 years? What do you do in that 5th year? Again, it's always good to be prepared, knowing what you're going to be faced with down the road. And then, again, that's scholarship. So if a student falls below the 2.85, we do a 1-semester grace period. So the student can still receive that scholarship for that semester, but then they have to bring that GPA up to a cumulative 2.85 or above. If they do not, unfortunately, they would lose it for that next semester. So again, those are the kind of questions that you want your student to be asking financial aid. So, absolutely love this slide. How true is it? Kid goes off to kindergarten. They don't want to leave their mom. And how the roles reverse 12 years later when they're heading off to college and the mother does not want them to go. And I'm sorry, it is a fact. The mothers do not want them to go. I was just mentioning earlier, I'm at a college fair and my table banner says New York and Italy because we have a campus in Florence. And it's usually the mom walking by and going too far. And I'm thinking for who? You are the student, and it's normally for the parent. Let them go. And over the course of the next couple of years, you're going to hear 2 words, fit and depends. And all of our colleges are different. You've got 2-year, 4-year, public, private, international, domestic, religious, non-denominational. We're all different. In Poughkeepsie alone, you have Vassar College, Marist College, you have the Culinary Institute of America, the culinary school. Bard College is a half-hour north, community college in town, a state university a half-hour away. West Point, an hour south. In a very small radius, you have a lot of different colleges, and you know what? We are all completely different. Not one of us is alike, with the exception of maybe Vassar and Marist and Bard, liberal arts, but we specialize in different things. So what I want to do for you today is to kind of, again, talk about what is financial aid. You're going to hear a lot of acronyms over the course of the next year or so. First one, cost of attendance, known as the COA. And then you have the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. The senior parents in here, or I should say parents of senior students, how many have started the FAFSA? Great. How many have submitted it? Excellent. For the ones who have not, I really highly recommend have it submitted by Thanksgiving, which is next week, which amazes me. Even if your student hasn't finalized their college list, send it, because you can add schools as the time goes on. Since many people are doing electronic, probably 99.9% of families, or I should say parents, they will, it gets processed pretty quickly. So again, even if they haven't finalized it, get it out. Early bird gets the worm and the well does run dry, which are 2 expressions that I'm sure you've heard. And that's the reality of our colleges and universities. You want to make sure that after your kids are accepted, that their financial aid packages are done in a timely fashion. What is the expected family contribution, known as the EFC? In the future, they're talking about next year. It hasn't been finalized yet, but there's going to be a lot of changes coming in financial aid. That EFC will no longer be known as the expected family contribution. It will be now known as the SAI, which will be the Student Aid Index. And then what is financial need? What are the different sources of financial aid? And then the last piece, which is the dreaded CSS profile. Any parents of seniors doing the profile? Okay, that's a whole other animal, or beast, I should say. So what is financial aid? It's very simple. It's resources that are available for students to fund their education. That's basically all it is. You're going to fill out that FAFSA, which isn't really too difficult. My suggestion is kind of put yourself in a separate room, no distractions, with your laptop, and fill it out. The government does want the parent and the student to be filling it out together, but we know how that's going to work. It'll become the parent who is filling it out. But please, 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 please be very careful when you're doing that. When they're asking for the student's social security number, don't put yours, because it's not going to match with the database, and then you have an issue. And you don't want to have an issue because you want financial aid, especially, again, that free money. A friend of ours, actually, you would think that they would know better, but he was filling out the form for his daughter, and he put his social security number, and he's still trying to fix it. So again, you know, it is an issue. It becomes difficult. So what is cost of attendance? Tuition fees, room and board, books, personal travel. So it's your billable cost, which when you receive a bill for that particular school, it will be tuition fees, room and board if your student resides on campus. The non-billable are the books, personal travel. So what I do for my students on the West Coast, they're going to have to do a plane ticket or two. I ask financial aid, please raise the student's cost of attendance to take into account the additional fees that a student has. If your students are majoring in majors that require an extensive amount of additional things, such as maybe lab equipment or art, reach out to the financial aid office and say, is there a way to increase the cost of attendance due to the fact that my student will have all of these additional charges for their particular major? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Now, one other thing about the cost of attendance, as I mentioned earlier, we're all different, our schools. We all cost different amounts. So the cost of attendance will be completely different at all of our schools. So completing the FAFSA before you do it, and again, referring back to the parents of senior students, how long did it take for when you did this to request that FSA ID to get that FSA ID?
About 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, so don't think that you can just go into a room and do everything at once and start the form. It takes several days before you are able to get that FSA ID information back. The FSA ID is needed for both the student and the parent. If the parent has more than one in college, the parent can use their FSA ID for both or however many students, but each student needs their own FSA ID. And again, keep them in a spot where you can easily access it, and make sure that you know whose is whose. Again, you don't want any type of issues. But it will take several days before you get that back, and they only ask, what, 5, 6 questions maybe to get your FSA ID?
It was quite a bit. I mean,
Was it?
You know, because we were able to interface our taxes from the IRS website, which is like, you should do that, otherwise you're gonna be there for hours.
Well, not the FAFSA, the FSA ID.
That wasn't bad.
No, like 5 or 6 questions. Again, it just takes them time to process it. So when the government started doing the whole FAFSA stuff, they used to go back 1 year, which was difficult for families because they don't do their taxes January 1st. It would take a while. So most students were estimating their income information. So the government said, all right, let's go back 2 years. Most people will have their taxes done, so that when they're filling out the form, it's accurate information. If you're in a situation where, for the parents of senior students, if you're in a situation where you may have been laid off, you have divorced, separated, you were furloughed, COVID, you had to take money out of accounts, and your income may look too inflated because you had to take out of your retirement or whatever. Any type of extenuating circumstance, you will have to write a letter to each of the schools that your student is applying to, the financial aid office. Do not send a letter to the FAFSA people because they're not doing anything with it. They want your income information for the year 2021. Everything in their eyes is black and white. It is, that this is what it is. Each school has that ability to adjust a student's information based upon information that you provide them. So if you fall into that category, then that's what you will need to do for each school. Separate letters, you can change everything, but make sure that you change the name of the school as well. So for junior parents in here, you're going to be using 2022 taxes, which is the year that we're in now. So these are the documents that you will be using to complete it. One thing is many families are like, I don't want to provide my student's social security number. Do it. In my 37 years, I've never heard of an issue. The only issue is when a parent puts theirs. Then we have an issue, as I mentioned. But just do it, because you're going to have to provide it to the school or the federal government anyway, if they're going to be receiving financial aid through federal or state. The IRS data retrieval tool, which was just mentioned, the parent had used that. It is an amazing tool. What it does is you click on a box and they basically head into the IRS and they're able to populate your income information onto the FAFSA, which is fabulous because then there's no opportunity for error. I did have a family one year, $250,000 income, and this is back in the day of all paper. They put down their income, and then they had their taxes paid of $250,000, so their expected family contribution was zero, because in reality, or on paper, they didn't have income. And then when we requested the tax returns to verify the income information, needless to say, it was wrong. And so much of the money that the student had received based upon a zero EFC had to go back because there was an error. And it's very difficult to do that on families, very difficult, because they kind of like, wow, look at what we're getting, and then all of a sudden like, oh wow, look what we just lost. And it wasn't a fault of the college, it wasn't a fault of the parent, it was an error. So just be very careful, check it off. Again, they're going to verify the information with the federal government.
May I ask you a question
Sure.
about that? Is there a reason why it won't populate? That's the bit I got stuck at, the IRS retrieval tool. And I can't understand why it won't link the information, because it's a tool that would be much more helpful using team. What are the situations in which it's not doing that? What is the obstacle for that?
That I do not know what the obstacle would be, but there is a phone number that you can call. It's 1-4-FED-AID, so it's 1-4-FED-AID. And what they'll do is they'll be able to answer the question or direct you on how to rectify that.
Okay, thank you.
Check the Social Security, maybe that was an error.
Could you repeat the phone number, please?
1-4-FED-AID.
Thank you.
And answer her question, we had that same issue, and we were in our son's ID, and so it wouldn't go. We had to make sure we used our own parent ID.
Your FSA ID.
Yeah, FSA ID. We were using our son's ID because, like you said, you have to read it.
Yeah.
I was signed in as him. When I said populate, he doesn't have a job, so it's like just grayed out and stayed there. And then I realized,
No, thank you.
I realized I had the wrong thing, and then I went back in, and about 2 days later, everything.
So we have to have an ID, like that's a parent ID and then a
Yes.
student ID?
So when you're doing that FSA ID, there's the link you can, I'm going to provide the PowerPoint. You can even go into each of our schools. There'll be a link for the FSA ID.
Okay,
But yes, you need one, and the student needs one.
okay, thank you.
And they are two definite different numbers. And then you're going to also use that as your electronic signature when you've completed the form and are submitting it. But yeah, that would be probably the biggest reason why you could
It
not have.
definitely is the reason I
Can you get a copy of this presentation? Okay.
Yes.
So, I
All
just
right.
wanted to say too that Chaminade does have
On
a
their
list.
website.
It's an amazing list. It's a step-by-step, and it made it really clear and very easy.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, another great resource. So basically, this is how FAFSA works. You and the student are filling it out. It gets sent to the federal government. The government's going to send the student what they call as a student aid report, known as a SAR, which will have their information. It will also tell them what their expected family contribution is, so again, no surprise. And then on the other side, it goes to our colleges and universities that they listed on the FAFSA. We don't do anything with it until the student has been accepted. On the student side, say they have 16 schools that they're applying to. You can only list 10. At that time, the student can pull the 10 off, add the next 6, and hit submit. It's very, very simple for them to do that. And again, we will not do anything with the information until the student has been accepted. So what's the family contribution? The government has their calculation of how they figure that out. And income, assets, number in household, number in college, all play a big role in determining out what the government feels that you can reasonably expect to afford or pay for a student's education. Now, as I mentioned before, those costs of attendance will be different for every one of our schools. The expected family contribution remains the same no matter what school your student is looking at. So if we have 3 schools, we have a $20,000 a year school, a $40,000 a year school, and a $60,000 a year school. You fill out the FAFSA, they come back and say your expected family contribution is $20,000. So at that $20,000 a year school, you're not eligible for the word need-based financial aid. But you can still borrow the loan, they can still work on campus, they may still be eligible for an academic merit-based scholarship because those have nothing to do with financial aid. That is, you don't have to apply for financial aid to be considered for that. So that's the $20,000. The $40,000 a year school, your expected family contribution is still $20,000 because it remains consistent. So you're entitled to $20,000 worth of need-based financial aid, student loan, grants from the school, and work opportunity. At the $60,000 a year school, same thing, $20,000 EFC, your financial need is $40,000, need-based. But are you going to get $40,000? And that's where that first question that your student asks, that's where that comes in. Because if your expectations are your student's going to receive $40,000, that may not be true. Many of our colleges and universities do not have the resources to fund a student's financial need 100%. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom, I just want you to have the facts. The schools that do meet a student's need 100%, you will more than likely be filling out that additional form, which is the CSS profile. And I'll get to that a little bit later. So basically, if that school, that $60,000 a year school, gives your student $30,000 of financial aid, where are you coming up with that additional resources? You had a question?
So just a question on the EFC. The number that they give you, is that for all 4 years or is that per year?
Per year. That's a very good question. You're going to be renewing the form every year. And that number will change based upon your income from the 2 years prior. And it could change because you have additional family members going to college or college members that have left school, either graduated or withdrew. So that will fluctuate. But, again, that's the question you want to know. Do you need 100%? Because then you're going to know, all right, well, they don't. So depending on what our expected family contribution is, depending on what the cost is, we have to figure out how we're going to afford this. So that's basically why I'm telling you to ask that particular question. So as I mentioned, these are the big topics or the big areas that are used. Income is very big. Your assets, your home is not, your personal residence is not considered an asset. But if you do have rental properties, a vacation home, then that is considered an asset. They're looking at your household size. So maybe it's mom, dad, 3 kids, so that's 5. The number in college, they're looking at students that are of traditional college age. You can put as many as you want. You may receive a letter from the school that they end up going to verifying all the students that are in college. So, you know, don't be surprised if every once in a while you may get a letter like, can you verify that, you know, Joe Smith is a full-time student at the school? And then once they have your signature, that should be sufficient.
Do they consider paid high school, like if you have kids in high school? and
No,
private
no,
school?
the government feels that there's plenty of public schools in your area, that it's a personal choice to send your kids to private school. But the profile does allow that, but you'll see why that they will allow it. And then the age of the older parent actually comes into play, so it's good to be a little older, because the government feels the older we get, the more money we should be putting away towards retirement, not funding our kids' education. So they're kind in regards to that. If your son or daughter has a trust or an inheritance, yes, you have to list it under their asset. However, if there's a stipulation that they cannot touch it till a certain age, you still need to list it, because again, federal government is like, yes, you will list it. We're not making the change. You'd have to send that letter to each of the schools asking them to remove it, because they cannot touch it. One suggestion, if you do that, maybe include a copy of it, you know, highlight the area where it says the student can't touch it till they're 21 or 25 or 30. Because if you don't, it's just going to go back and forth, that they're going to want verification. Just do it at the get-go. Financial need, got a question?
Can you say more about if they do have a 529 plan?
Oh, 529, yeah. So if the 529 plan is in the name of the parent, then you would list it as an asset. They only take a very small portion of it to include in the expected family contribution. I want to say it's like 7.25%. It's not a lot. If a grandparent has it, then it's not listed on the FAFSA, but next year it lists as income for the student. So that's more of a detriment to the student, because the government does a calculation for the parent and one for the student. They take the two together to make it the expected family contribution. So there is a big difference in how they calculate out the student's income and assets compared to the parent. So that's pretty much how the 529 works. You can use the 529 for applications. You can use the 529 for books, supplies. You can use the 529 while they're in high school. Anything educational related, you can use it for.
I just had a quick, before we get too far away, when you said the academic scholarship, some people require the separate application. So if you find that to be true, at what point do you send that? Do you send that just along with all the financial?
No. You do that. That's why you're going to ask that up front.
Right.
Because they may have to do it right when they're applying for this to the school.
So right away, you're not
Oh, yeah,
waiting at
right
all
away,
on that.
right.
And then the second question I had was for the letters that you're sending to each college because of the extenuating circumstances. Do you wait to send that once you get admitted, or you're sending that right away also?
I would send it right away, because even what they'll do is they'll hold on to that information. They create a file for the student. So at least then you know that they have that information for the students, so that when they apply or when they've been accepted or whatever, they have that at the get-go.
So that would come at the time or just after the application's been submitted?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So very simple, cost of attendance, I kind of went over it already. Tuition fees, room, board, books, personal travel, cost of attendance minus the student's expected family contribution equals the need. So if it's $60,000 for cost of attendance, $20,000 the EFC, the need would be $40,000.
Back to the 529, where you were saying if it's in the grandparents' name, then it becomes income for the student. Is that only in that case where it's the grandparent? Oh, okay.
Sorry, on the 529 too. If it's in the child's name, then
It's income.
it's income.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So different types of financial aid: gift aid, loan, self-help, and grants. Question?
Just want to make sure I got this. Grants usually come from the
The school.
Or the, okay.
Well, I mean, there's federal grants, there's state grants, there's institutional grants. Those are really the only three, and I'll talk a little bit more about those.
And is it true that psychologists will look at that versus not look at that? So for example, they will not look at the need, they will admit the student and then look at the need?
That's considered need blind. Yeah,
Okay.
but where they're not looking at what mom and dad do to try to figure out if the student would need financial assistance. That's another good question to ask when you visit with them. Are you need blind or need aware? Many schools are need aware. They're trying to figure out how to best enroll a class without breaking the bank. So again, merit-based scholarship, academic, you have the grants, which are need-based, and then you have the self-help, which is in the form of working on campus, and a student loan. I do hear often where a parent doesn't want their student working as a freshman, they want them to focus on their school, and I understand, but I like when they work, because it really does a lot for them. They're going to receive a paycheck. They're going to learn a lot about time management because they have responsibilities other than just getting up and going to class. They can work anywhere from the library. What a better place to sit and do homework while working in the library, or work on a paper. They can work in the athletic department. They can be a tour guide for the admissions office, financial aid. Every office on campus needs student helpers. So they can work 2 hours a week. They can work up to 20. I don't know any student that works 20. That, it's not the goal of the school to have them work. It's to go to school. But it's just, and some students will learn a skill. I met with a student yesterday who is becoming certified as a yoga instructor. And I told her, I go, hey, athletic department, become one of our yoga instructors, and she's going to do that. And then the other one is student loans. I do hear, I don't want them to be in debt. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But I think it does several things. It provides buy-in, because now the student has responsibility in financing their education. They are the ones that have to pay this loan back. And even if you are planning to pay it so that they don't have to do the loan, there is no penalty for paying off the loan before it's due. There is no penalty for it. So if you want to do that after, then please feel free to do it. But once the student has made X number of consecutive payments, I'm not sure what it would be, then pay it off. And then what happens? You're now establishing credit for your student, where they can rent an apartment, they can buy a car, they can buy a house without having necessarily a co-signer. Because it is tough for students just graduating to establish that credit.
I'm sorry, one question on that. Do you know if those loans are earning interest on the loan they're taking out? I come from the UK system where the interest doesn't get charged until the student graduates. Is that the same here or not?
There's no, and that's one of my slides that I'll talk about that question.
So my daughter already knows she wants to work on campus, so at what point does that become something you say or do, or where?
So when you receive your financial aid package, if they're eligible for need-based financial aid, it would be in the form of federal work study. And every year, and again, we're all different, so you need to check with the schools and how they deal with that. But I know at Marist, we have a job fair the first week of school, and all the students that have eligibility for federal work study are invited to the fair. It's kind of like this, where they're meeting with different departments, they're putting in an application, and then that's how they get jobs on campus. Even the students that don't have federal work study, within 2 weeks, then they can find jobs on campus. It is the responsibility of the schools to place the students who have federal work study into jobs before the students that do not have that eligibility. They give us a pool of money, and then we provide the students with this money in the form of a paycheck every week that the students that work on campus.
I have an older daughter that's been through college, and one thing I encourage is if they can on-campus job versus off-campus, because like her on-campus job would ask her, what's your final schedule, what's your course schedule?
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier in terms of arranging.
Yeah.
So finals week she could have a different schedule than she had during
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. The colleges are very, very good in regards to that. You know, and every semester, their hours are gonna change because their schedules change. So each of the departments will work with the students individually, asking them what their availability is, and then we kind of try to figure it out with them. And again, they're there for school. Does that mean that they're gonna, you know, blow off work 5 times in 2 weeks? No. Unfortunately, we need the help, so but we do work with them in comparison to working off campus.
For the loan option, when I went to school, there was a federal student loan program and a very, very low interest rate. Does that kind of program still exist, and when does that process kick off?
Yeah, and that's coming up.
Can I ask the difference between federal need-based work study versus non-need-based campus employment?
Sure, yeah.
What is the difference between how you qualify for each?
So when you fill out that FAFSA and the government determines what your expected family contribution is, again, if you're looking at the $60,000 a year school and your EFC is 20, your need is $40,000. So what the schools will do is they will put in their need, Stafford loan, work opportunity, and need-based grant. So in that scenario, it would be federal campus work study. If a student does not have financial need, it's considered campus employment. And the big difference is that the federal government will pay X number of cents on the dollar for the student that's working on campus that has federal work study. Campus employment, the college pays the full dollar. And we have to hire students that have federal because that's federal money. And to remain in compliance, it is our responsibility to place those students first. That's why we have that job fair, to enable students to apply to all different jobs on campus. In a 2-week period where like the work study students should have found a job by now, if they want it, then we open the remaining jobs to students that have campus employment. And at that point, most students that want to work are working on campus.
At what point do you apply for campus employment?
Well, I mean, for us, we have the job fair the very first week of school. But again, it could be different at other schools. You have to do the research on the different schools and ask them these type of questions. And that would be a good question for your student asking when you're meeting with financial aid. So this is Marist and what we offer. Again, we're different from other schools, so you need to do the research and see what those schools will offer. So we do offer academic scholarship. I spoke about that. We do offer an alumni legacy scholarship. We are Division I for sports, so we do offer financial assistance for that. We have a music scholarship broken out into choral, instrumental. We have a theater scholarship, and we're not too far from West Point, so we do participate in Army ROTC. Private scholarship, endowed scholarships, go to the financial aid pages of the schools they're looking at and kind of find endowed scholarships. That's money that a person or whomever donates to the college and has specific requirements for the student who is applying for it. So you may have a $5,000 scholarship for a business major concentrating in finance, has to show financial need, so you have to do FAFSA, has a certain GPA. So there are requirements for them. But then there are some that are for a good academic incoming freshman. I know at Marist we have them for Chaminade students because we're part of that family. So students that come from these schools will get X number of dollars in the quote endowed scholarship. And then your outside scholarships are maybe HR in your companies or corporations. Check with them, see if they offer anything for dependents of their employees. Go to the local chamber of commerce, go to the local library. I know that this site here for students has scholarships that they can apply for in the local community. And then you can Google and do searches for larger scholarships. Just remember, though, that your students at this point, especially for the parents of seniors, they've been writing essays, they've been filling out applications, they've been in school, they've been taking tests. writing papers. The last thing that they probably want to do is to fill out another application, write another essay. So they may not share this information with you. Ask them, hey, have you checked out to see if there's any additional resources? And if they go no, then encourage. And if they say yes, kind of check, well, which ones, so that you get accurate information. As I mentioned before, the federal government does have grants. The first one is the Pell Grant. This is for economically disadvantaged students. It's based on your EFC. So if you fill out the FAFSA and the government says your EFC is 0, up to a certain number, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head, it changes every year, will determine if the student is eligible. If every student in my school were eligible for Pell, they all would receive Pell. But, you know, when you look at the amount that they're giving, if your EFC is 0 and the student's looking at that $60,000 a year school, and they're eligible for the full $68.95, it's not a lot of money. So there is discussion about, of course, increasing it, which they do every year. It does go up a little every year, but it's based upon EFC and cost of attendance. So if your EFC were 0 and your cost of attendance was $20,000, you're not going to get that max $68.95 because that's for a higher cost of attendance. It will be reflective of what the cost of attendance is at that particular school. SEOG is a supplemental educational opportunity grant. Students have to be Pell eligible in order to receive it. Like federal work study, our schools are given a pool of money, and we figure out how to best utilize those resources. So of course, the first students we're looking at are 0 EFCs, and then we kind of go up until it's been exhausted. If your student has Pell eligibility on their financial aid package, but you don't see SEOG, then you call that person you met when they were looking at the school and let them know, I see my son or daughter has a Pell Grant, but there's no SEOG, can we get some? And either it'll be like, well, we've expended our allotment, or let me see what I can do. But you don't know unless you ask. Excuse me. The Teach Grant is for students that want to be a teacher. This is a tough one because, again, we know when they're 17, 18 years old, filling out applications, and they ask for a major, they really don't know what they want to do. I had a student yesterday wants to do interior design and athletic training. It's here and it's here, and they probably will change over the course of time. And the same thing goes for students that want to teach. The grant is given by the federal government. It's up to $4,000 a year, but there is a contract that they're signing because they have to agree to teach over a certain number of years in an underrepresented area. So if the student goes and does this and then decides, not for me, I'm going to leave it, it becomes a loan. So be careful with that one. It just would mean student will be paying more money when they graduate. Cal Grants, every one of our states wants to keep our students in that state to go to school. California is no different. So we have the Cal Grants in California. You fill out the FAFSA. My suggestion would be when you're listing schools in the section that receive the FAFSA information, list the California schools first. Excuse me. It's based upon your net taxable income from your state, as well as your students' Cal Grant verified GPA, which is sent directly from the school. So again, you don't have to try to figure out how much are we going to get. They'll do that for you if you are eligible. And then, of course, each of our schools has need-based grant. Did you have a question? No. So the Cal Grants, 3 different types, A, B, and the C. The A is for students that are going to public and private schools. The B is for students that need additional economic resources. And then the C is for students that are doing kind of vocational certification type of programs. CalGrants.org is a great resource. It will provide you with much more detailed information. So Cal Grant A, they're for students attending, again, the privates and the public, so I just kind of pretty much mentioned that. And then again, student employment, which I have sort of gone over. Please make sure, though, when you get your bills from the schools, so at Marist we're semester-based. Our bills go out in July, they're due in August. And we do say, make sure not to deduct the allocation for federal work study, because it's an allocation to work, it does not come off of the bill. And of course, I'm just as guilty about reading directions. You know, families pay the bill, and if the allocation were $5,000 for the year, they've deducted that $2,500 for the fall semester, and then a couple weeks later they get a bill for $2,500. Surprise. And it's because it's an allocation that they can earn. It does not come off the bill. So please be very careful about that. Even if a student doesn't work on campus, nothing happens to that. It's just the allocation is there if they want to work. It doesn't miraculously turn into a grant. It doesn't become a loan. It's just there for them to utilize if they want to work. Here's the loan. We've broken out into two categories. There's the unsubsidized loan and there's the subsidized. The subsidized are for students that have need. So again, if you have that cost of attendance minus financial aid gives you the need. If you have need, then it would be subsidized. And that's where the government will pay your interest while the student is in school. If you do not have financial need, but you want the student to take out a loan, it's considered unsubsidized, and you will be responsible for interest payments. I would check with the school, see how much the interest would be. If you can afford it, pay it. If not, no worries, it just accrues. Another thing, you can see the interest rates have climbed tremendously, and they're going to continue to go up. They look at this for every July 1, and you can see, and I put that just so that you can see the jump in the interest rate of what it was last year to what it is this year, and even before that it was much lower. When COVID hit, they kind of plummeted. And then the PLUS loan, parent loan for undergraduate studies. This is your loan. You do have to complete the FAFSA. It is based on credit. You can borrow the cost of attendance minus all of the financial aid. So if the school costs $60,000, your need is $40,000, your EFC were $20,000, you can borrow $20,000 because you cannot exceed the cost of attendance. If in that same situation, cost of attendance is $60,000, EFC is $20,000, your need is $40,000, but the school gave you $30,000, you can borrow $30,000 because you have that unmet need of $10,000 plus your EFC. And repayments will begin 60 days after the final disbursement for that academic year. And again, that will be different whether it's quarter, trimesters, or semesters. So at Marist, we're semester-based. Financial aid is put on the student's account in 3 weeks after they start in the spring. 60 days from that point is when you will begin your payments for that year. If you apply and are denied because of credit, then your student can borrow an extra $5,000 in unsubsidized loan. But you have to apply, be denied, and then they can do that. Another thing, if you're going to write a letter of reconsideration for financial assistance, which many, 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 many people do, some schools would be like, no, too bad, sorry. Other schools will be, okay, let's figure out the situation here and see what we can do to help you. When you get your award letters from the schools your student has been accepted to, check off everything that you want. Do not list that you want the Stafford loan and the work study. Does that mean you have to do it? No. It just means that you are accepting it. And I say this because if you're going to write a letter of reconsideration asking for additional free money, they may look and see, did the student take the loan, which is self-help, because they want the student to be participating in this. They may look at that and say, student's not willing to take out a loan or work on campus, then we're not willing to provide additional resources because they have those additional, but they choose not to take it. Again, that might not be the fact at all the schools, but you don't know. So just take it. The thing that may happen is the financial aid office may reach out to your student and say, hey, you said you wanted a loan, you haven't applied for it yet. And the student just says, well, we're not going to do it this year, we'll wait till next year. But again, don't write a letter looking for more free money when the student hasn't accepted the self-help. And then private loans, these are in the name of the student. Every school has a lender list for these that we use, that we prefer to work with, different lenders. There is a different interest rate. Again, it's in the name of the student, but what 18-year-old has credit? They don't. This is credit-based. So if I held up a mirror, you are the cosigner. Or the grandparents tend to be a cosigner, or an aunt or an uncle. They can borrow the same as the PLUS loan, the cost of attendance minus all the financial aid. They don't start making payments until they've been out of school for a certain period of time. And then if they do have a cosigner, which they would need, the cosigner gets dropped after 24 consecutive on-time payments. Monthly payment plans are excellent. 10 or 12 months, and basically you take your bottom line of what you owe over the course of the year, and they break that payment up into 10 or 12 months. So basically, you pay an application fee, which is pretty minimal. There's no credit history, there's no finance charge. You're just agreeing that, yeah, I'm gonna take what I owe of $10,000 over the course of the year and break it up into 10 months, so I'm paying this company $1,000 a month. If your student owes, say, $20,000, maybe do a PLUS loan of 10 and do the payment plan of 10. So that's less money that you're actually borrowing from the lender.
Question on the PLUS loan. So does that mean the payments start while they're still in school?
Yep.
So it's your loan.
Mhm.
And can those usually be taken out mid-year as well? Like, so if you turn it down first
Yeah.
semester.
Well, you don't even, and that's, you gotta be careful. Some schools will list it in your financial aid package, and it's like, oh, $60,000, look at that. Yeah, it's a $60,000 loan if you choose to do it. So that, to me, is very deceiving. We don't do that, but we do provide additional information, letting the families know that this is another option to help with the cost of the attendance. So with the payment plans, they start, your freshman students in college, May 1, they make their decision where they're gonna go. Your payment's gonna pretty much start then. Even in, say, August, when you're supposed to mail in your bill and you're like, oh, can't do this, you can still get into the plan. It's just you will have to make up the months that you lost in paying to catch up. But it's such a great resource, because again, sometimes it's easier to come up with each month than like $10,000 once.
Do all schools offer the monthly payment plan, or is that just based on each school's option?
Most of us, probably 90% of us, but again, when you make your appointment, ask. And you can do the research by looking online.
Okay.
For different payment plan options. Some schools will work directly with the student to help them. Other schools will not. Some schools will let them use their campus work study to help pay the bill. Most schools will not, because then it becomes just such a nightmare.
Does that campus work study versus regular jobs, do they get paid different?
No, they do not get paid different. They get
$40
paid
an hour, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. The only difference is that the government is paying a certain percentage of the dollar for federal work study.
Gotcha.
And then here, FAFSA Simplification Act is in the process. Things are going to change. So for all of the freshman, sophomore parents in the room, it's going to be completely different. So we'll see you next year. But right now, as I mentioned, the EFC will be known as the Student Aid Index. They want to get rid of that contribution kind of thing. They just want it to be like an indicator of streamlining the application. They're saying that they're taking the length of the form down tremendously. A couple of things that I think are going to be a little difficult. The number in college. Right now, if you have one in college, the government says your EFC is 20 based upon one, but you're filling out for two because you have two kids in college. The EFC right now gets cut in half. So instead of your EFC being 20, it's 10 for each of them. I don't know what the ramifications will be of this. To me, it can't be really that good, because if you've got 3 or 4 kids going to college and it's not being reflected in the student aid index, I don't know what's going to happen with that. And then parents in a single parent household, right now, if the situation, if you fall into that category, the FAFSA is completed by the custodial parent. It's with whom the student resides with. Doesn't matter who claims the student on the tax returns, it's whom the student resides with. So the families are like, well, 50-50. Well, then it's supposed to be whoever provides the most resources. So you can figure out which category you fall into. The only thing that they're looking for from the non-custodial parent on the FAFSA is the amount of child support paid. That's it. The profile, which is the other form, and I'll talk a little bit more about that next slide, they want to know everything about the non-custodial parent. They want to know their income, their assets. They want to know the income and assets of the spouse if they've remarried. Your home value gets included in that. But again, with the FAFSA, if they change this, I don't know what the ramifications of that will be because they haven't provided us with that information. So I don't know what they're going to be looking for from the non-custodial parent for the FAFSA. But again, right now, it's custodial parent and child support paid by the non-custodial parent. That's it. So this could be a really big hit too.
Good. Two questions. The FAFSA, you have to redo that every single year?
Yeah, and that, I'll talk about that at the end, yeah.
Okay. Then, does it, I would imagine it matters if you're in a separated divorce situation, how you fill out your taxes in terms of the FAFSA,
Yep.
correct? So what's the most beneficial? I mean, I don't know, is it?
It's up to you. We're being taped, that's why.
Right, but it's, they do look at, I guess the question is, I think you answered it, but I just want to say it out loud so I'm clear. The quote, non-custodial, whoever is less than 50%, has the child less than 50% of the time,
Yeah.
they're only looking at the other parent's income when
But they do
that by looking at taxes.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so it's the tax information of the non-custodial parent, or the custodial parent, it's with whom the student resides with. The only thing they're looking at with the non-custodial parent is the amount of child support that's paid. And again, that's gonna change, I don't know what it's gonna be.
I'm sorry, on that note, but if it is 50-50, are both households required? Okay,
No,
the FAFSA.
if it's 50-50, maybe have the student live with the custodial an hour more, but no. It's who provides the most resources.
How do they figure that out?
You have to.
There's a whole other form for that. That doesn't apply to me at the moment. I'm not planning on divorcing my husband.
Just in case, though.
Not today. Not today. And I hope he's not divorcing me. Okay, well, wow, that's wacky, okay.
And then here's that other form. Remember at the beginning I said, the first question, does your school need 100%? If your school does, they more than likely will be requiring this particular form. There is a fee for the first college that requires it of $25. For every school after that, it's an additional $16. Your student may be applying to all schools that do not require it. You don't have to worry about this form. But the schools that meet your need 100%, they will be requiring this form. And the only reason why this form is used is to figure out how they can best use their institutional funds. Has nothing to do with federal, has nothing to do with state. It's only based upon that particular school. So where the FAFSA in that single parent household was only looking for the custodial parent's income information, CSS Profile wants everybody's. And sometimes it's very difficult for a student to get that information from the non-custodial parent, and that's a whole other can of worms. Same thing, it's open on October 1st for students to complete. Your Stanford, your USCs, your Ivy League schools, those are schools that will be requiring you to complete this. So with them asking for this additional information, your home value is included in this. The EFC, so say your EFC was 20 on FAFSA, so that will be used for federal loans, work opportunities, and your state. But again, for institutional funds, if your EFC were 20 on the FAFSA, with all of the additional information being requested by CSS Profile, the EFC is going to go up because they're looking at additional information. And what is the bottom line? It's less money that school has to give the student to meet their need 100%. So that's the reason why, for the most part.
So, is it best for us to go ahead and just fill that out?
No, out of our 4,500 colleges and universities in the US, 350, it's all the schools that are gonna meet your need 100%. So, again, check with the websites of your student school, or you can Google schools that use CSS Profile, and it'll give you the list. If your student is applying to any one of them, then yes, you will have to do it.
Do they talk to each other? Let's say, so you're alone, you go up and down, they don't check that and go, you're providing more information. You're on film.
Exactly. Has nothing to do with federal or state.
So a friend of mine had done this, and I'm wondering if this is sort of a common practice, and I've also heard a thing on NPR about this. Her son, they live in Massachusetts, her son was accepted to UMass, I think Amherst, he also got into Williams. They each gave them, she's basically pretty much the single parent, custodial parent. So UMass sort of was much less money, obviously, it's a state institution. But she had what you encourage us to do, an ongoing relationship with the office. She was also an alum. She got Williams to match whatever UMass was going to charge her. So just by developing a relationship, talking with them, and working with them, is that something that you find happens a lot, where a parent can call and say, well, we got into Stanford, but we got into Berkeley too.
Yeah.
Can you match it? Can you
Yeah.
help us with that?
You most certainly, and I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do that. However, some schools will be like, too bad.
Right.
And
of
other
course.
schools, let's see what we can try to do.
Right.
And we do see that. And they may ask you to send them copies of the financial aid package from the schools, the other
Sure.
schools, so that they can kind of compare. And what they may do is they'll take the cost of attendance at, what it'd be cost to go to this school compared to what we're giving them to go to our school. And many times, a lot of people don't kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
Where even though the one school's giving you less, it costs less to go there.
Sure.
So they don't do the comparison. They just look at the number and they freak. So I do highly, highly encourage that. If your student really, really wants to go to a school, let that school know. I've been accepted to these other schools. I've received far more financial aid at this particular school. This is my number one choice, or my top choice, or I really want to go there, but I can't swing it. Can you help me? I mean, that's basically, what does it take to write the letter?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the initial meeting should come from the student, not the parent.
The parents and the students go together.
Oh, that would be if you're actually meeting in person.
Yes.
So my daughter's schools are not all close, so is it appropriate to reach out to these people through an email and ask questions?
Sure, you can do that.
Or call them on the
yeah.
phone?
I mean, so my thought was, if you're visiting a campus to tour, take the 10 minutes or so to visit financial aid, schedule an appointment when you're touring, so that you can establish that in-person, face-to-face relationship. Other than that, I mean, you can go to the website, find one of the assistant directors, and at that point, I think I would have the parent and the student kind of correspond together. Let them know that, have the student do it, but the student copies you. So that they're aware that you're involved in this as well.
And would you be in contact directly with the financial aid person, or I know in one instance my daughter's been in contact with the rep that came to the school.
Yeah.
Are either as
That's the
valuable?
admissions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't have the background. Part of my background's financial aid, so I know what to do. They may not know.
So she could reach out to that person though and say, who should I contact to have financial aid questions answered?
And then when you have established that rapport with that particular person, just ask them, is it okay if we use you or utilize your services? Sometimes they may say, well, you know, we're really busy, just whoever you get, I may not be available, but again, you're trying.
Right.
My whole thought was, if you're gonna be on campus, stop by.
Right. And is this something that, all these questions and everything we're discussing, this would be once they've seen that you've already applied?
No,
No?
not even, not
Oh, okay.
necessarily. You're just asking particular questions. Does your school meet need 100%? Tell me about the scholarship, the renewal, if I go 5 years, if I'm Pell, SCOG, you know, these are the kind of questions that you want to ask. But the biggest one, of course, is does your school meet need 100%? Because if it doesn't, and you have a large need, where are you coming up with the resources to fund the other? Right now, the other thing is, and of course it's going to probably change, if you currently have a student in college and your senior now is going to be a freshman and that other student moves up a grade in college, you're going to have 2 in college. You want to reach out to the older student's financial aid office and say, hey, any chance you can provide us with additional resources? I now have 2 in college. Because traditionally, whatever a student enters a particular school with as an incoming freshman is what they're going to stay with over the course of the 4 years. So if they're getting a $30,000 grant and you're applying for financial aid each year and on time, they should be getting $30,000 a year. But if you now have 2 in college, there's more need. Maybe they can get an extra maybe an extra $5,000. Everything and anything will help, but you will not know unless you ask. They're not going to look and go, oh, look, John Smith has 2 in college now, let's give him more money. It kind of doesn't work that way. And the same thing with scholarships. If your student has a $25,000 merit-based scholarship and they've gotten a 4.0 and they're just outstanding, they're involved in everything and anything, but they're going to keep that for the next 4 years, and you feel that they should get more, reach out, ask, is there any opportunity to receive more? And maybe not, but again, you don't know unless you ask.
And I'm not sure I understand why you need to tell them, because if you're resubmitting every year, say that you now have a second child in, don't they know that?
They do know that, but are they going to do anything with it?
They don't care.
Yeah,
They're not going to offer up money.
Yeah.
They're not gonna call us and say.
Let me give you more money.
So they, so it's not lack of information, just you gotta push it.
Right, so that's for your older child that's in school. So now the older one graduates, and you only have that one. So that younger one was based on 2, so their aid package probably looks pretty good. What's gonna happen to their aid package? Because now you only have 1. The EFC is going to go right up, they're going to lose money, so you have to be prepared for that. However, with all of the changes, again, I don't know what's going to transpire with that. I just want you to know that all of our colleges and universities are required by law to have a net price calculator. You can go onto our websites, they'll ask you a bunch of different information, and it'll give you an idea of what the student would be eligible for at that particular school. I, myself, work with my students on the West Coast that really want to go to Marist. I work with them individually, so I tell them, if you're doing this, just kind of remember we can work together. I don't want them to get discouraged thinking that, oh, I can't do it. But some schools would be like, yep, that's it. We're all different. Questions?
I just have one other question. Just so that I'm clear, so we're asking, if they, it's a separate application for the academic scholarship, and if they say yes, then that's the CSS.
No.
Something totally different.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there are schools, we do not. Every student accepted is considered, but there are schools that require, if a student wants an academic-based scholarship, they have to fill out a particular form.
Got it, okay.
And there are deadlines. The renewal, every year you have to do the financial aid renewal. The student will receive what they call as a renewal form. A majority of it will be populated from the prior year, but you have to update it. Check with the school's website for deadlines, because they will have a deadline if they want all of the forms the college is looking for on a particular date or by a particular date, with ramifications that if you don't have it, the student could possibly lose institutional money. So if your kid's getting $30,000 worth of need-based grant and you're not on time, they may lose that, a portion of it. You don't know. Again, we're all different, so you want to make sure that you're following all of the deadlines, and there are deadlines.
And that should be evident if you go on the website of that school, what all the deadlines are.
And if you can't find it, just call them. What's the deadline for returning students to apply for financial aid for the upcoming year? Freshmen is different, because they really don't make the choice until May 1 of where they're gonna go. So they will have received their financial aid package already. But with the returning students, it's usually sometime in March or April that they have to get all of their forms in to apply for that next academic year.
Is it true, I heard that East Coast private schools, if that's the route you're going, don't give out merit scholarships, but a lot of the Midwest private schools do, like the merit, is that not true?
No. No, we do.
I have two questions. So, we turned in our FAFSA, my son's a senior, we turned in our FAFSA. Definitely, we did not put his 529 on it. So how do I make change to call that number?
Yeah, I would call the number, but you have your FSA ID numbers, you can go in.
All right, if you can go in and adjust it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then what is the timing in terms of the student aid report? Like, when do they get that?
Have you gotten your student aid report yet? The student?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I check the school email too, because we use that.
Yeah.
So, no, I haven't received anything back yet.
And that's the only email address, right?
That's the only email address, it's just school.
So what we're just talking about with the changes year to year, I'm just not sure I understand. So in terms of, I only have one child, but just in the general case, like I just say, some families have, coming along. And that type of change doesn't automatically apply. But what about, let's say you're making less money when your student's entering as a freshman, then you get a big raise. Are they gonna see that? So
Well, because they are gonna see that only because the expected, or the student aid index at that point will be higher. So they'll see that just in the form of the, that EFC or SAI. They'll see that. And again, it's based on need. So if there's no more need, unfortunately, the student would get the unsub loan, and that's probably it. And if it's like a fluke, or you had to cash in a retirement or whatever, you have to let them know in writing to pull that out if that's the reason why the income went up.
So when you declare your home value, what metric do you use?
You don't include your home value on the FAFSA. You don't include your retirement. None of that is used in FAFSA. If you have to fill out the profile, the home value is used.
Which metric do you use? The current value or based on the property tax value?
Your call.
Your home values have gone up.
Right. Yeah. I would use Zillow.
That's the current value.
Current value?
That would be current.
They're looking at current, they want current value, yeah. And they're only gonna take a small portion of it and use that in the calculation, but unfortunately, they're gonna use it on the profile.
I know you said, so if you are doing it all based on 2021 taxes, you expect to change, you know that it changes, business is clear, everything's different. And there's a letter at the onset, you submit the FAFSA, the first one, is that where you submit the letter? Saying, just let you know that this is based on something that is no longer my reality.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I mean, because you know right away, even when you're filling it out, you're like, oh, but
I'm
this.
not making this.
Right, and that's what you want them to know.
We can probably take two more questions.
This came up the last time we had a meeting, like a couple months ago. The email situation, there seemed to be a problem with students' email, using their Chaminade email for college stuff. That what was happening was, there was an issue with something, and so you guys talked about perhaps that for college stuff, the kids should be like creating a Gmail account or something. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that seems like
Yeah, I mean, I think a
that
lot of your
their
students.
email is crashing and things are happening, they're getting too much information.
Well, and I think a lot of that comes from when they're
Yeah.
doing like the PSAT here and stuff like that. There is a question on there that says if you want college information, please put your email address, and they put their Chaminade one, and so they get bombarded from that. Yes, I think it is a good idea if they can to create like a whole separate email just for colleges as they're reaching out to reps or starting their applications and whatnot, so that it's more going to a central location. It just helps streamline everything a little bit more. Because yeah, you will get bombarded from colleges, you know, so I think it is a good idea if you can to have that separate one.
And
Make
do
sure
you-
it's an appropriate email address.
Yeah.
Plus they're not gonna be here once
A
they
certain
graduate.
time
Yeah, it'll be
when you are
right.
no longer using the Chaminade email
Yes,
addresses?
it's a good question. So we allow our students to use it, I want to say through the summer after their senior year, so that hopefully they have something else set up by the end of their senior year. But just so you know, if they are using their Chaminade email address, which they're able to do, that's perfectly fine. Just know that once they graduate, they will be able to access that through the end of the summer. But we'll cut it off when the new school year starts.
Is there a way for them to change, if they already included their Chaminade email address for their Naviance and all that stuff, is there a way for them to change it so they can put a new email?
Well, the Naviance one will always be their Chaminade one, because the Naviance is through the school.
You'd have to notify the school.
It
Yeah.
goes through this, it goes, so when they put their college stuff and they put that little box and say, yeah, send me information, it's gonna go to Chaminade.
Correct.
So how do they easily change it without having to?
Well, I'm talking more about like if there's certain things you're reaching out about, to do it from that separate one. But yes, the Naviance one, we can't change that. That is in the system as part of
Right.
how it all works.
Exactly.
Bottom
But
line.
it's just all the colleges are sending them to
I know.
the Chaminade thing, because it's through the Naviance thing, so it's,
And there's only so much we can do,
of course. So
you know, but
should the students reach out and just change it with the school director?
Yeah.
yeah, if there's something particular, yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys, the counselors are gonna be around. I don't know if you're gonna be sticking around at all, but thank you so much for coming in and doing that. We're gonna be around for a little bit, just so you know, the bell's gonna ring in 5 minutes and there'll be kids everywhere, just FYI. But you guys